This is Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell on the Forge Audio Network.
Forge fans, welcome back. Today is June 2nd, 2023. I've got a great episode of Forge Daily ahead. I am joined by a very special guest who, if you follow the CPL, I'm sure you're very familiar with. We talk about how he's seen Forge evolve over his time with the league and what we can expect from the match against Cavalry tomorrow. So I'll introduce him during our interview. Enjoy. Charlie O'Conner Clarke, welcome to Forge Daily. Thanks so much for joining me.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
I want to start by talking a little bit about you. I know you've been with the CPL a while. Can you talk a little bit about your role and when you started?
So I've been with the league since day one, pretty much all 5 seasons so far. Haven't managed to get rid of me, but I help run a lot of the content we do, just covering the league, both writing about all the games and talking to players, interviews and video stuff on the pitch. Just trying to tell stories about this awesome Canadian soccer league we got going here.
Cool. Well, I think then you'd have an interesting perspective now that you've seen the CPL grow over the past few years. How have you seen Forge FC evolve from that kind of analytical or reporter perspective that you have?
Yeah, Forge are, to me, really one of the most fascinating stories in all of Canadian soccer, just because, I mean, obviously it turns heads when you make every single final for the first 4 years of the league. But the way that Forge operate, the way that they continue to kind of push the bar and be sort of the example that other teams strive to beat in this league is just so impressive, and seeing them do it consistently year after year. They aren't doing it this year, but to do it in like CONCACAF as they've done in previous years, to do it in a Canadian championship, and just to consistently play some of the most entertaining and some of the most tactically fluid and intelligent soccer really in the whole country is just fascinating for a team that's, again, only about 5 years old.
Right.
It's just remarkable.
You've watched all of these teams now in the CPL over time. How do you think, or what do you think separates Forge from the rest of the league? And you can talk about playing style, but also potentially coaching style, because I know you're familiar with Coach Bobby Smirniotis.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of it does come back to Bobby and the way that he kind of gets all of his players to buy into a specific identity of the way that this team plays. They very rarely are going to sit back and just lump the ball forward. They're always trying to play very, very, attractive, high quality soccer with the ball on the ground. And he's able to get players to kind of understand that identity, and they're all very intelligent and flexible players. Bobby also has worked with so many great soccer players, even as a development coach at Sigma, so he's able to convince players even to join this project and to buy into it. And he's always, he rarely misses the player that he's identified that he wants to bring in. And I think part of it is just how much every single player at the club really kind of understands what is expected of them at this club, what they have to do on the pitch, and what that standard is at that club to maintain. Yeah, no,
there definitely is that mutual respect there. And I think Bobby has absolutely proven himself. That's why players are so inclined to come play under him and kind of buy into that style that you just described. Are there any players that you kind of noticed standing out when you first started with the league that are still with Forge FC now?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of players from that first team in 2019 that we kind of expected to be stars and then were. Obviously, Kyle Bekker being the biggest one. He's Mr. Forge, really. He's been there the whole way. He's the first captain, and he's been really probably the best player in the CPL consistently over now going into a 5th year. But what's also fascinating to me is how many players came out of that first team and maybe grew into bigger stars than maybe we even expected. Obviously Tristan Borges was great in that first year, and now he's kind of evolved his game and he's settled as the rest of the league also improves around him. David Choinière always is he's just always there in the big moments for this team, it seems. I don't know how, and every time I ask him, he doesn't know how.
Right? He's so nonchalant.
I don't know. I don't get it. And he doesn't seem to get it either, because I ask him and he's like, I don't know, man. The ball just happens to fall at my feet in the big moments.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. He's
crazy.
so funny to interview because he's a man of very few words, but
Yeah.
he knows how to get the job done for sure.
He does. He always does. There's just so many players that have kind of bought into this club and really are kind of part of the fabric of it, that have been around for so long. I mean, even thinking of like Alex Ashniote-Johnson playing all sorts of positions. He's come so far, and really you can't imagine a Forge team without him. And there's just a lot of players that are like that. And then just the players that have come on since then have all kind of adapted to that and followed that example set by those now veteran players.
They're definitely setting the standard as well. And sorry to interrupt there, but these players who started with the team have set this precedent where any other players that come sign on are like, okay, this is what it's going to look like, and I need to be able to follow the path that they've made.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, at a team like this, you can only put 11 players in the starting lineup, right? But just to be able to train with some of the players that have been at this club for so long, when you come into Forge, you understand that you have to fight for a spot in the lineup, and even if you're not in the starting lineup, this club is the depth is so important that you're going to come off the bench probably in a game, and you have to be able to get engaged immediately and to make a difference. Otherwise, they're not going to keep you around. You have to be able to do that and to show what it means to be a Forge player, really, and the training pitch is where it starts.
I want to shift into tomorrow's matchup against Cavalry. You've got so much knowledge now on the league as a whole. Can you talk about your overall thoughts and what we might expect tomorrow?
Yeah, it's always really the most exciting matchup in the league when Forge play Cavalry, going back to that first year when it seemed to kind of come out of nowhere that these teams just hated each other. And that kind of hasn't stopped. Yeah. I mean, even there was the playoffs last year in the semifinal where it was really, really intense, as it always is. There's hard tackles, there's cards, but there's also a lot of really entertaining soccer and goals being scored between these teams as well.
Yeah.
I mean, they played each other in that home opener for Forge earlier in the year, and that was a great game. There were 4 really amazing goals in that game, and it just seems to never disappoint when these teams play each other. It's always like at least an 8 out of 10. And it's always going to be kind of a matchup that even neutral fans sort of circle on the calendar, and they have to watch. And obviously both of these teams coming off losses, both these teams actually lost to York in their last game. So there's a lot of motivation.
Yeah, that was Cavalry's first loss as well, right?
Yeah, York are on a kind of a streak of beating undefeated teams. Both these teams have a lot to prove this weekend as well.
Yeah. Cavalry now sitting 4th in the league. They've got a loss, a win, and 5 draws. What do you think that record says about them as a team? Like, is this common to see 5 draws?
No. It's been kind of weird in general this season in the CPL, with a lot of games ending up that tight. It's obviously proof of how close the league is in general, but with Cavalry specifically, they've been pretty frustrated, I think, at times, because a lot of those draws have come from them taking the lead and not being able to hold on to it. Right? I think they've dropped the most points in the league from winning positions, and there's just been so many games where they'll score first. They even did it against Forge twice in that home opener. They scored to take the lead, and then they let the other team back into it, and they're dropping points. So at the end of the day, they're happy to be able to take that lead, but then it's one of those where you have to stay aggressive after you score, right? You have to go score a second goal, maybe a third goal, and put the game to bed, and they haven't really been able to do that so far this year. So that's kind of why they aren't maybe banking as many wins as they would have liked.
Yeah. Forge also experiencing that same frustration, creating so many opportunities, but at the end of the day, not being able to finish and close out the match. What do you think it's going to take for them to kind of, I don't even know how to phrase this other than put the ball in the back of the net?
That's exactly it. Like it's one of those where a coach can really say all he wants, but at the end of the day, it has to be a player in a moment when the ball falls to him, he has to just put his foot through it.
Yeah,
It has to go from the net. It's crazy that they've had 35 shots in 2 games on its own, but for them not to score more than that, they're definitely frustrated. Obviously, you're much more concerned if you're not creating shots at all. And I mean, Forge obviously have a lot of talented attacking players, so I'm still not particularly worried. They've been through stretches like this before. They had stretches like it last year. Right. I think in June they went through a bit of a stretch, but then Wubens Passius went on an absolute tear and started scoring like 6. I think he scored like 6 goals in 4 games or something like that. So there's always players in his team that can just explode and go on that run of form. So I think at the end of the day, Bobby Smirniotis will probably be pretty unconcerned. He'll just be hoping that some of these start falling their way soon.
For sure. Well, even in talking to Bobby, he talks about how his philosophy kind of revolves around the idea that you don't get too excited over a win and you don't get too upset over a loss. And that kind of reflects in the way that Forge is able to come out of these stints. Because you're right, last year, I think Bobby said it was 4 to 5 losses in a row. And then, like you said, Passius just taking over.
Yeah.
Who do you see tomorrow standing out on the Forge side and on the Cavalry side?
Well, it'll be an interesting one to see how Forge line up in this game. They've played a lot of games recently. They had to play midweek the week before in Montreal, obviously. So they're maybe a little bit more fatigued at the moment than Cavalry would be, who haven't had those games in the middle of the week. So maybe a couple changes in the squad, but obviously the big matchup whenever these two teams play each other is Resort Rama up against Jose Escalante on that wing. Those players always going at it pretty hard in games between these teams. They'll get pretty physical with one another. There'll be fouls probably, but it's always kind of entertaining to see them absolutely battling up and down that flank.
It is entertaining. I will say that. I think
100%.
The whole opener Cavalry came. There was 7 or 8 yellow cards given. Now it was. Yeah,
that's probably roughly par for the course when these teams play each other. They're always pretty intense. So that I'd keep an eye on that wing during this game. And then Cavalry, I think their best player so far this season has been Ali Musi, who's been lining up on the wing a lot. He's a very, very talented player on the dribble, and he's pretty explosive with his ability to run and to drive towards the box. So I think Forge will have their hands full with him as well.
Cool. Okay, well, thank you, Charlie, for sharing your insight. Before we finish up, I was telling you earlier, before I started this job, I was studying your interviews, okay? I was watching, trying to learn, how to get it done. I need to hear this from you. You're at Tim Hortons Field for a Forge game. You have a post-game interview. What player are you grabbing if you can choose from any of the Forge players, and why?
Oh, I think my favorite Forge player to interview is Alex Janssen.
Okay. Care to elaborate?
Because he'll always be honest. He'll always be very honest. Sometimes he can't help himself from swearing, but that's more fun as well, to be honest. Yeah. So,
and maybe the editing is worth it for the interview.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, it's worth it. He's always honest. He's always pretty loose. So he's a fun guy to talk to.
All right, Charlie. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much again for coming on.
Absolutely, no problem. Thank you for having me.
That'll wrap up today's episode. Thank you all so much for listening. You can tune into the match tomorrow on One Soccer and catch Charlie breaking it all down on Monday for his podcast with the CPL. Have an awesome weekend, and I will talk to you then.
This has been Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell. If you like what you heard, please like, follow, subscribe, comment, and share.